Hello everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So I wanted to put out a quick video about the other primary elections that are happening today across the country. I talked about the primary races happening in North Dakota in my video yesterday, so I just wanted to touch upon these other couple races that are happening so people have an idea of what to look out for and what candidates to root for and support in today's elections and when the results come in later tonight. Moving over to South Carolina, we can see in the 1st Congressional District that Nancy Mace is running for re-election. And she is a bit of a controversial congresswoman, to say the least. She was one of the 8 Republicans that voted to remove Kevin McCarthy from the speakership at the end of 2023. And while she has some blind spots on social conservative issues in many ways, she overall has been pretty fantastic when it comes to other policy issues, ranging from immigration to foreign policy. She's been very, very anti-foreign aid, anti-sending billions of dollars over to Ukraine. And that's something that is very, very good. And she is a prime example of someone that got pushed to the right by a primary challenge, even though she did not get primaried out. Her challenger last time, Katie Arrington, pushed her to the brink of losing the primary. She only won by about 10 points in 2022 renomination for the district that she's an incumbent for. Because Mace was not that great during her first term. She had some questionable votes, but she came back this Congress, had a much more conservative voting record, and has really surprisingly become one of the most conservative and reliable Republican members in the House to have good votes on different pieces of legislation. And even when bills come up on social issues, she still tends to fall in line with the Republican majority. So she's really not even that much of a hindrance on that front. And her challenger, Catherine Templeton, the former director of the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, is running to oust her from the seat. She's much more of your typical Republican when it comes to a wide range of issues, especially social conservatism, but she has also indicated support for sending aid to Ukraine and being weaker on immigration and foreign policy than Nancy Mace is. So for that reason, and also for her vote to oust McCarthy, which was overall a net positive, since McCarthy was doing next to nothing of what he promised, breaking his promises and making backdoor deals with the Democrats, I am still supporting Nancy Mace in this race and supporting her renomination bid. And so is Donald Trump, which was a good endorsement from the former president. Mace also has the endorsement of Mike Johnson, the current Speaker of the House, Henry McMaster, the governor of South Carolina. So she has some big supporters. Meanwhile, Catherine Templeton has not gotten anyone of note, except for Kevin McCarthy, of course, which, even though it's oddly not listed here, he did endorse her, and that's never a good sign. And she also is a member of the Aspen Institute, by the way, which is a George Soros-backed group. So that's a big, major red flag about Templeton right there, another reason to keep Mace in office. And Mace is way out fundraising her, almost 4-1. She has raised over $2.2 million, while Catherine Templeton has raised only about $700,000. And Mace has spent about $1.7 million of that, while Catherine Templeton has only spent about $400,000. We can also see that Mace leads in the polling against Templeton pretty consistently by about a 20-plus point spread, 43-21 earlier in May, and then 47-22 in the later May poll. So Mace should hold on, and I think that's the best result in this seat, in my personal opinion. In the 3rd district, the incumbent is Jeff Duncan, and he is retiring from this seat, not seeking re-election. And the best options to replace him, as we can see there are several candidates running, are either Mark Burns, who has been endorsed by Donald Trump. He's a political outsider who has ran for Congress in 2018 and 2022, but did not get the nomination either time. But he is a pastor that Trump is personally friends with and likes. We also have Stuart Jones, who is a current state representative from South Carolina, is a member of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, and I think he's even more conservative than Mark Burns. And looking at who has endorsed these candidates, we can see that again. Trump endorsed Burns, and House Freedom Caucus endorsed Stuart Jones. Meanwhile, Henry McMaster, the governor of South Carolina, once again, endorsed Sherry Biggs in this race, and she is the more establishment candidate. These are the 3 main candidates in the race, and we can see that from the polling. Biggs led the only poll of this race in May with 12%, to Mark Burns 11%, and Stuart Jones at 9%. So all pretty close, but there's 62% of the vote undecided in that poll. We can see from the fundraising numbers that Sherry Biggs has raised over $500,000 and spent about $400,000 of that, while Mark Burns has pretty much the exact same fundraising numbers. They're running pretty even, while Stuart Jones has raised and spent a decent amount less, at about $200,000 raised to about $150,000 spent. But he's still being competitive. He still has a good shot in this race, according to the polling. There are runoffs in South Carolina primaries if no candidate clears 50% of the vote. And the best possible result, in my opinion, would be Mark Burns and Stuart Jones advancing to the runoff, because either of them would be good options. Stuart Jones was endorsed by the Freedom Caucus, but Mark Burns is also pledged to join the Freedom Caucus if he gets elected. And considering that the current incumbent, Jeff Duncan, is himself a current member of the House Freedom Caucus, either of these candidates would be a suitable replacement to make sure that we maintain a conservative vote in this seat. So I hope that Sherry Biggs gets locked out of a potential runoff and does not advance further in this vote and gets defeated. In the 4th district, finally, we have William Timmons, the current incumbent of this seat, and he is a massive rhino. He's not very good. He supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. He's on record doing so, and he's just overall a pretty liberal Republican with a pretty mediocre voting record, really, to say the least. And he's running against Adam Morgan, a state representative from South Carolina, who was the founding chairman of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus. So he's very, very conservative. And this is a 1v1 race. There are no other candidates in this primary. It's a showdown between Morgan and Timmons. Unsurprisingly, Morgan has been endorsed by the House Freedom Caucus and many of its members, as we can see right here, and Jim DeMint, the former U.S. Senator from South Carolina, who was very conservative. Meanwhile, Timmons has, you guessed it, gotten the endorsement of Donald Trump, another poor endorsement from Trump in the June 11th primaries, as he had some bad ones in North Dakota, as I talked about in my last video. Timmons also got the endorsement of Mike Johnson, Jim Jordan, once again, Henry McMaster, and also the Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina. But we can see down here that Morgan has actually been raising pretty well against incumbent. He has raised about $580,000 and spent most of that, over $500,000 in spending in this race, while Timmons has raised $1.9 million and spent about $1.7 million of that on this primary alone, showing that he is worried. He is scared of being primaried out and defeated. So Morgan is being competitive in the spending game, and we can see that there are no polls to speak of for this race, which to me speaks to that being a very good sign for Morgan and how competitive he will be. Because if there was a good poll for Timmons, you would be sure that he would be blasting it all over the airwaves and saying how he is winning this race. That's my personal opinion on it. I think Morgan, especially with no other candidates that would be taking votes away from him, has a really good chance to pull off an upset against Timmons, who almost lost in 2022 with really no major opposition. He barely cleared the 50% mark in the primary, getting about 52% of the vote against a bunch of little-known and little-funded challengers. So I think with a well-known, well-established, and well-funded challenger, he has a real shot to go down, and that would be a very good result from this primary in South Carolina. And overall, let's hope that today yields some great conservative victories as the results come in tonight in not just South Carolina, but also North Dakota and other states around the country holding their primary elections.